Hi everyone, it's Plastic EP coming in from Melbourne, Australia. Got the fantastic Mr. Shampoo. I've got Paul Brett coming in from the UK. How are you, Mr. Shampoo, and how are you, Paul?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to meet you both. Hello, and how you doing?
That's cool. Now I want to tell everybody about this fantastic book that's Paul written. I want every Beatles fan out there to go and get this book. It's called Finding Fretless, right? The guitar was used on the White Album. We're going to go through it, what songs it was used. Paul will tell us all about it. But let me tell you, this has now become a great mystery, right? We want to appeal to all the Beatle fans out there in the world. Someone might have a recording about this guitar. Someone might have photos of the Beatles using this guitar in the sessions. Because I believe at Abbey Road it was put in a locker. And when they wanted the fretless guitar, it was like, where's the special guitar? Where's the mystery guitar? Bring it out and they'd use it. Apparently, I believe they all had a go on that guitar. Tell us a little bit more about that, Paul, with the White Album.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just going back a step. So we know that the Beatles got this guitar in 1967, August 1967. George Harrison was out in LA and he brought it back to the UK with him. So that's the beginning of the story, if you like. But they bring it back to Abbey Road. So the next we hear of it after August 1967 is June 1968 at Abbey Road. And a UK DJ, Kenny Everett, goes along with a buddy of his who's a sound engineer called Tony Olivestone to go and interview the Beatles. Now, Tony was over the moon about this because he'd never been to Abbey Road and he was a huge Beatles fan. So he was really excited about going along. He had a new tape machine that Kenny Everett didn't know how to use. So that's why Kenny took him along with him. So they turn up to Abbey Road. Now, there was some recording going on during the day, another interview happening, but their interview was in the evening. And initially, you've got Kenny Everett talking to John Lennon, okay? And John is playing this peculiar guitar that Kenny hadn't seen before, and he's strumming away on it. And I'll play you what happens.
Yeah, play the audio. Please, everyone hear this. All the Beatles fans in the world, play the audio.
Yeah, so let's play this. Hopefully you can hear this.
So. You sit here cross-legged on the amplifier, strumming away. Guru-ing. I hope we're going to hear this, listeners, because we have a lot of fun doing them, but never quite hear them, listeners. Never quite hear them when you get him. Well, I will play this completely all the way through, just right. To go. Oh, you. What kind of guitar is that? Very strange looking. Fretless guitar. Nobody's playing.
No, he's playing it now.
Get out of listeners.
Okay, and he goes on a little bit, so I'll just pause that there. But I mean, yeah, so we know it's in the studio. This is the 6th of June, 1968. Okay, so that's Kenny Everett with John Lennon and Tony Olivestone recording. I mean, later on in that long interview, the rest of the Beatles come and join in as well. So we know they're all there that particular day. All right. So the big question is, what are they doing with it in the studio? And are they using it on anything at all? I mean, that's the obvious question, isn't it? Now, I didn't know a lot of this stuff, obviously, until I started researching the book and I got in touch with a lot of people to find out about it. So I kind of categorized it a little bit. I went to some professionals that really know their music, a couple of professors at different universities. One was a Beatles fan, for 40, 50 years, been a big Beatles fan. He plays fretless as well. And his name is Kenny Jenkins, all right? Now, Kenny Jenkins is a senior lecturer of music performance and production at Leeds Beckett University in the north of England. And he said, when he listened to the White Album, I listened carefully to Helter Skelter and Happiness is a Warm Gun. And having spent a fair amount of time playing a fretless guitar myself, I can definitely say that is what is being used on both of these tracks. So that's one professor of music, all right? There's another guy, another professor of music, a chap called Dr. Richard Perks. Now, he's down at the University of Kent. I'm reading my notes here, guys, because there's a lot for me to take in. But he said about it, I can say with some degree of certainty that a fretless electric guitar was used during the recording of the Beatles' White Album. On the track Happiness is a Warm Gun, the characteristic timbre of a fretless guitar is unmistakable, and he gives a little time frame of when you can hear it. Now, I've got those on my website. I've got findingfretless.com. If you go to that, there's a discography section there, all right? And you'll see there's a section for the Beatles, and there's 5 or 6 tracks in there that we think that the instrument was played on, the fretless was played on. So there's good evidence from those guys who just listen to it with their own ears because they're fretless experts and they know their music, all right? But importantly, what was really important about this was when I started publishing some stuff and putting some stuff on Twitter and that, a guy called Jan Gorski-Messer got in touch with me. And he said, Paul, I know about that guitar. He said, it wasn't George's guitar, it was the Beatles' guitar. It was kind of bought for them together, all right? Although George owned it and looked after it, it was regarded as the Beatles' guitar rather than George's in that sense, all right? But he was a friend of George Harrison's for over 30 years. He musician himself, a session player. He met George many, many times, okay? And he spoke specifically about that fretless guitar. And this is what he said. He said, during Happiness is a Warm Gun on the overdubs, neither John nor George were very happy with the bend notes on the section they call I Need a Fix, okay, as originally played by George on his Les Paul Lucy, okay? But then they remembered the fretless in the cupboard. Now, the cupboard at Abbey Road Studio 2 is under the stairs that goes up to the control room. There's a big space there, cupboards. They used to keep instruments and maracas and tambourines and all sorts of things in that cupboard under the stairs, okay? I remembered that the fretless was in there. He said, both John and George then played several versions of the very bendy guitar line on the fretless with compression and a Vox distortion pedal. George couldn't remember whose version they used in the end, but you know they were both doing it, okay? He says the fuzz pedal, and Mr. Shampoo, you might be interested in this stuff, you know, different pedals they used and everything. The fuzz pedal was a Vox tone bender, and they played it through a Fender twin reverb, okay? And what Jan was telling me is that obviously on the recordings and on the tapes and everything, they very rarely put down a specific instrument. So if it was a guitar section, they would put GTR maybe as a short abbreviation. They wouldn't say it was the Bartel fretless, it was a Gibson, it was, you know, a Rickenbacker, whatever. Okay, so it doesn't get a mention on any of the notes even. He said, but I've listened to the original masters of the White Album many times. There's definitely no glass or metal slide. So people saying, is it a slide guitar? There's none of that glass or metal slide on Happiness is a Warm Gun. Or as George Harrison called it, fret sparkle. When you go over a fret, you get that very little change, you know, in the note. You know, when you're close up to it, you're on, you know, into tune. On the fretless guitar, it's quite variable. It's very difficult to play in tune. Okay. Now, John, he also said that John had a more experimental turn of mind. He liked new things. He liked gadgets and odd things like that. And he was also more of a fan of bending notes when he played lead than George was. George preferred clean notes, sliding climbs, and vibrating the strings. But he says, when I listen to John playing the lead section, I'm certain that is the Bartel fretless. It's more his style and feel. He used to mimic the vocal phrase with the guitar phrase, but quite aggressively. So his view is it was more likely that John would pick up the guitar and use it than maybe George or even Paul on occasions. Now, to add to that, later on, Jan came back to me again later on at a later stage and says, I found this old tape. He's got the tape, all right? So on it says, it's just a cryptic. It says CT for GMKS, September 26th to October the 4th, and raw parts. So it's just raw music on there, you know, raw tracks. And he says on that tape there are guitar and organ overdubs for Happiness is a Warm Gun. And he says, I have no doubt that the Bartel fretless is being played. There are no fretting sounds whatsoever, and the climbs give it away absolutely. Much easier to hear without the rest of the track, obviously. He said it was played by either John or Paul. The style is very much Paul, but the repetitive refrain is very much John. it certainly wasn't George. I think it was probably John again, but we don't know. So there's some interesting stuff there. Now, one other piece of evidence really that kind of sort of puts us in the direction of it, that they were constantly thinking about the fretless and how they could use it. It came up on, have you heard of the Nagra reel tapes, the Nagra tapes?
I haven't heard of those tapes.
Okay, right. So these are Nagra reel tapes from January 1969. Now, another author, a guy called Doug Solpe, came up with this. And in his book, he's got a book called Drugs, Divorce, and the Slipping Image, the complete unauthorized story of the Beatles' Get Back sessions. And he says in there, they're talking about various bits, but they're talking specifically about a track called Long, 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 which is on the White Album, of course. All right. And what they're saying is John improvises a spoken interlude parodying his Happiness is a Warm Gun, the original recording of which appeared on the Beatles, the White Album. John mentions that he'd like to emulate the particular sound that George achieved on Long, 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 which appeared on that album again. John wasn't present for that recording session, but he assumes that George had used the fretless guitar. George said, no, I didn't actually. I used another guitar. But the thing is, John is thinking about that fretless guitar again. And this is in 69. So it's around that period. So there's a lot of evidence and everything to say, definitely it's on the White Album without somebody who's in the studio filming it or taking a photo. And that's the big question, isn't it? Plastic and Mr. Shampoo, where's the photograph? You know, there must be one. Now, again, Jan tells me that there is a photograph. He's seen two, but he can't find them, and nor can I. And I've looked through thousands of photos. So Beatles fans out there, if they know anything about this, the description that he gave me is that the photos I've seen in the past, he says, I've seen a photo of John noodling with it in Studio 2, okay, looking slightly to his right towards the camera during the White Album recording sessions. But there is also another one from the same session showing George talking to George Martin, Harrison talking to George Martin, with the Bartell visible from about halfway up the neck in the background. The picture, he says, is usually cropped, which doesn't help. So that the Bartell neck and that of Macca's Rickenbacker bass are never used and never seen in the most used version of it. So it appears there must be two images out there somewhere. So we need some help to find them. So if you ever see them, I'd love to know.
Paul, I appeal to all Beatle fans to look through their photos or whatever they got. Some people keep photos. If you see the fretless guitar on any photos, I want you to contact Paul immediately. Tell him what you know about the guitar if you know more information. But I'll tell you one piece of solid evidence that you've got to go through now. They used to do the magazine, the Beatle Monthly, and apparently they had Neil Aspinall talk about that fretless guitar, but he kept it like a secret. I want you to tell the world about that article in the monthly Beatle magazine if you know what month and what date that came out.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm remembering back now. So we talk about George being in LA in August 1967. He's there with Aspinall and a group of people there for about a week. We know it's August the 3rd, 1967. He goes for a recording session. And that's where they see the guitar. Aspinall can see that George Harrison is really impressed with this fretless guitar, something he hadn't seen before. So he says, well, I'm going to order one. All right. But we know that because there's a very small paragraph in the Beatles Monthly magazine from October that year, just a couple of months later when he's doing his little write-up. And he refers to, we went to this recording session, doesn't say which one, but we know what it is. And we saw this session player. We know who that is. And we saw him playing this really unusual, special, you don't know what guitar. I've ordered one in secret, all right? So hence we call it the secret guitar. But we also know that George Harrison called it the mad guitar, all right? He christened it the mad guitar because it's difficult, you know? So we now call it the secret mad guitar. So that's October 1967, Beatles Monthly magazine. There's that little paragraph in there.
See, that's the best information you can have. Now, I just want to say, I call that the Beatles secret guitar, the Beatles fretless guitar. Now, I'm going to let Mr. Shampoo ask you a few questions, and I'll return in a minute. Go for the questions, Mr. Shampoo.
Well, thank you, Plastic, and it's very nice to meet you, Paul. And I wanted to tell everybody on the show today, I have my bass guitar here to show you that real close here. If you see on the fretboard here, there's these frets that run along here, and you know most guitars are fretted, and mostly the bass guitars are fretless, not guitars.
Right. That's
so
right.
Somebody had a vision that they wanted a fretless guitar. So when I slide on a string here, it's much more difficult because you've got the frets. But when you don't have frets, you can go, right, Paul? I mean, it's got this sliding sound to it, and you have to be very, very, very precise on a fretless. So this guitar was probably, you know, if you didn't do it right, the intonation would be off. So that's why they probably called it the mad guitar. And, you know, I've read a lot of articles on this particular Bartel guitar as well. And I wonder if Paul ever played it, because Paul could play guitar very, very well. And he did on the Beatles. So, Paul, do you know if Paul actually, I'm sure he played it.
I'm confident too that he did. The reason I say that, a couple of things. He was in the studio on the 6th of June 1968 during the interview. They were all involved with it at the end, okay? And they all have a little jam session at the end. And I don't know who it was. They all swapped instruments, you know? So somebody else was playing the drums, not Ringo, you know?
Right.
Now, when there's an unusual guitar around, for anybody who's a fan of instruments, they're going to pick it up and want to go, let me have a go. I want to have a go at it. I've got a little mock-up here. I don't know if you can see this. There we go. Right, that's what it looked like. But you would have picked it up for sure and had a go. There's also, we know that Paul had fretless bass, like you were just saying. He's had fretless bass as well. And also Jan Gorski-Mercer says that definitely during sessions, Paul picked it up and they weren't sure whether Paul used it at that stage or not. Who ended up on the final recordings for some of those tracks is very, very difficult to say. There are other tracks, and we spoke about two there, particularly about Happiness is a Warm Gun. But there's on Helter Skelter. Now, that's an interesting one because you can really hear that one. There's a long extended version of that recording that they did, was about 12 minutes long. All right. Now, if you go to minute 9 of that recording, and I can give you the link to this Plastic after the show, I'll put it on comments or whatever. But you can hear the Bartel fretless all over that. I mean, it's very, very distinctive. Okay. Now, the other thing is that there's reportedly, because it's never been released, there's an even longer version of that, a 27-minute version, never been released. So my view is possibly, without hearing it, that the Bartel fretless was also used on the longest ever recording the Beatles ever made. We don't know for certain, but it's on the 12-minute version. It's on the version that came out on the album. Why wouldn't it be on the long version too?
Well, you know, Paul,
I just want to say, Nathan, I want you to read out what our big friend from Chachula Pret, one of our greatest friends out there, read out what he said there, Mr. Shampoo, for us, if you can read it.
I can't read it. Sorry.
Okay, I'll read it out. This is fascinating. Mr. Brett, I'm looking forward to reading your book. Great interview. Good morning to Mr. EP and Mr. Shampoo. You guys are groovy. Now, I want to say, if you want to hear the greatest Beatle radio show out there, right? He's in Boston. Look up Chachula Pret. She's got Seaside Oldies. That's one of the stations he uses. He's got his own station. You cannot listen to one of the finest radio programs out there. I actually say all over the world. And I also think, Paul, the Chachi should get you on the show for a radio interview because it's just such a fascinating subject. And here's the second message, which we appreciate him tuning in the show. I have been in that cupboard under the stairs in Studio 2. Lots of toys to play with, tambourines, etc. No bananas there. I'm sure there's no bananas, though.
No bananas, no. I think that's right, and I think that what is different about the Bartel, it wasn't a guitar that they were going to pay regular. It wasn't one of their main guitars that they would pick up and use every day, but it was something that they would go to the cupboard and pick out when they wanted a special effect. All right, so I'm not saying it was, you know, the Beatles used it on everything. They certainly didn't. They used it for specific things, and you know, the fact that it was a secret guitar, it actually stayed a secret until 2019, when my friend, well, because the story is, isn't it, that George Harrison gave it to my friend Ray Russell. That's how I got to find out about it, and then I started doing this research, and that's how the story came about. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Ray had it all those years and nobody knew anything about it until we started doing, you know, the interviews and the background and the research behind it all, that the stories started to come out. Now, funnily enough, there were some other people beginning to twig. They'd heard this radio interview thinking, why don't we know about this fretless guitar? It's not in any of the books. You know, it's not been written about before. Why don't we know about it? I can't answer that. I'm just glad that we didn't, and I get to tell the story, which is fantastic.
Yeah, but I want to say this, Paul. I didn't know about the guitar until I saw your book. Now, you got to understand, at this point, a few people may know about it in the UK, right? But I'm sure the majority of Beatle fans, I reckon most of them, didn't know about the guitar. Now, Churchill Pret, if you knew about the guitar, right, the fretless guitar, just send me a message what you knew about it, when you knew about it. But there's very few Beatle people that know about the secret Beatle guitar, the secret fretless guitar. And you know what? To get you on the show and go through the book, and then get Ray on, who owned it, who George Harrison gave him the book, and then he auctioned it off for, I think it was £185,000. Is that correct?
It was £190,000. Yeah.
Okay, so, but I'm saying, what a great gift that is. George Harrison gives you a guitar. It's not the money, but I'm saying that it's worth something. And that you see the photo of George Harrison at Friar Park, and there he's got all his guitars, and there in the back is the famous fretless one. I mean, how big a story is that, Mr. Shampoo? I ask you, as a musician and as a Beatle fan.
Well, you know, Classic and Paul, I have read that Jimi Hendrix and Frank Zappa were owners of this Bartel guitar as well. And there's this wonderful guitar maker called Eastwood Guitars. They are reissuing this Bartel guitar. And now this guitar is a beautifully designed guitar. I've seen it in pictures and on your book. It is a very beautiful design looking guitar. It was way ahead of its time. You know, 1967, I mean, that's when the Beatles got it. So, you know, there's many books, Tony Bacon and, you know, the Beatles yearbook. It is not mentioned or seen in any of those books. So this is a very breakthrough in all Beatle fanatics of guitars, because it was never told, and it didn't come out till like 2019, and it's a secret. And, you know, like most people don't know about it. But if you want to see it, it's on the Antique Roadshow, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah, the British version of the Antiques Roadshow. But guys, what I can tell you is what is really significant about this guitar. What makes it? I say it's one of the Beatles' rarest guitars. All right, there were a couple of others made, but why this is historically important. This guitar. The reason being is the guy that designed it and made it is a guy called Paul Bath. Now, Paul Bath, believe it or not, was one of the guys, him and a chap called George Beecham, who together in the 1930s created the first electric pickup and gave the world the electric guitar. So the DNA of that fretless guitar through Paul Bath goes right the way back to the very creation of the electric guitar, which is one of the world's most popular instruments today. So it's got real history behind it. And you're right, Mr. Shampoo, that they did make a couple of others. The one that George got was the original prototype, the very first one that they put together. What it was actually one of their regular guitars, 6-string guitars. They used the parts from that, but they took the frets out and they put a Bakelite cap on the top of the fingerboard. Okay, so it's actually a bit of a sandwich that and made some other modifications to it, etc. But yeah, so we know that Frank Zappa picked one up in 1972. It was hanging around in a guitar store in California, and he picked it up off the shelf. He had it for 10 years as a load of recordings. So if you go to my website, findingfretless.com, have a search around on there. You'll see the recordings that Zappa did with it. You'll see the ones that we're suggesting without 100% certainty, but we think we've got it. That the Beatles have done also, and a few other. There's a guy in Portland, Oregon, that's got the Frank Zappa one now. He records with it. He still uses it today. All right, and there's one other that is still in existence, and it belongs to the son of the president of the Bartel company. He has it. He found it on eBay. How good is that?
Now, I just want to say, to me, one of the greatest books written about guitars and basses and all that is that book, Beatle Gear.
Yeah.
Now, I doubt it's in there. I doubt it's in there. If anybody's got the book, look it up and tell Plastic Fee have you got the book?
It's not in there, Plastic.
That's all I need to know. So that's how rare that's how rare that guitar is. And let me tell you, you don't know how proud I am to bring this knowledge of that special guitar to the world and break the story, especially in the US and around the world, even though it might have been known to a few people in the UK. Up until this point, no one knew about it. Am I right?
Yeah, that's it.
It was very radical to use a fretless guitar in 1967 because the Beatles were always looking for that sound. And, if you listen to the guitar, it sounds totally different when it's clean than when they distort it.
Yeah.
So, when you hit a fretless bass or a guitar that's fretless, you get more sustain and you get different tonal qualities, and you can do slides that you can't do. You can do it on this, but it's tough. And it doesn't
but I also said it's like a violin. I'd be right to say it's like a violin. When I mean violin, you got to hit those notes exact because there's nothing there. And also another piece of information which a lot of people don't know. I have seen an original Beatles acetate, right? Which my friend Nigel Pearce has. And when he held it up on the show, because it's got every single release from Abbey Road, including acetates, and he held it up and it said, "Happiness is a warm gun in your hand." That was the original title.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. So you know what this proves? Even in 2022, there's still things surfacing about the Beatles. And if you're lucky enough, you get that nugget of information and you can share it out to the world. This is like, to me, investigative reporting. That's what I love. When I find out about something that no one knows and I'm bringing it to the world, I know I'm doing my job by entertaining people because it's something no one has heard. So as I said, through Paul, you don't know how big it is, right? That we found out about his fantastic book. And now the US, through this show and other shows, and you'll get radio shows and people will interview you, right? But your book, Finding Fretless, people have got to go out there now and buy it to actually read the fascinating story and tell them where all the links are, Paul.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to get in touch with me, if you've got any information that might be useful, email me at findingfretless@gmail.com. If you want to find out a little bit more about the book and a little bit more about the story and the people and the characters involved, the website is findingfretless.com, all one word. So it's very easy to get in touch with me. Email address is on there as well. And I'll tell you one other thing that I would call out to Beatles fans and George Harrison fans is, I believe there's still more to find out. I don't think we've got to the bottom of this story just yet. There's possibly more stuff with the Beatles, but I think importantly, George had it at his home from when the Beatles split, and right through till 1985. He had it in his collection. Did he ever use it on his own recordings? On his solo albums or anything else? Loads of musicians used to go to his place and record, and they all used to go to his room where he's got all his guitars out and everything. So I think there's more to come out, and I think there's more to discover. So if anyone's got any information, love to hear it.
Now, Paul, we're going to say goodbye in a minute, but now I want you to tell everyone where they can buy the book. It's Amazon as well, is it? Where is it now? People can go straight away and buy it.
Yeah, it is available on Amazon. So, just put in Finding Fretless, George Harrison's guitar in there. You'll find it. You can get it on my website, findingfretless.com. Be able to order it from there. Distribute worldwide, so you can get it wherever you are. So, it'd be nice to sell a few more copies and people can read it for themselves. There's a lot more detail in the book, of course.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thanks for watching. It's fantastic having Mr. Shampoo co-hosting. And let me tell you, the Beatle world is so happy and to find out about this fretless guitar, the Beatles' secret guitar, because, you know, a lot of people can't keep secrets, but now the secret's out. And it's fascinating to me that it ended up in the Beatle Monthly, because to me, the sound recording of John describing the guitar and the Monthly magazine when it came out, the Beatles Monthly, because that was such a big seller to every Beatle fan who wanted to know the latest news of the Beatles. That seals the deal there, how great this guitar is. Thank you again, Paul, and thank you, Mr. Shampoo.
Thank you very much indeed. Nice talking to you guys, and you take